All right, everybody, happy Sunday and welcome to another episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Blazer, and we have another chat lined up this week. Joining me, my co-host from Casual Game Studio, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Surviving the heat. It is super hot, man. It has been just like out of control. You go outside and you melt. My air conditioner is like begging for me to like give it a swift death, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. Other than that, just a busy dev week, and this thing with the topic that we're going to be talking about has actually been like bothering me quite a bit. So how are you doing, Josh?
Busy as always as well. Oh, good. We're at saying that it's freezing in Australia. It's burning in the
Oh,
in the United States. Again, we're entering Khalid weather very shortly
yes.
here.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, thanks for stopping by. It's been very busy. I'm about 30,000 words into the Souls-like book. I'm nearing the end of writing it. Image sourcing is its own other beast.
Yeah.
And for those of you who missed the big announcement, I announced we have a game jam for Game Wisdom last week. It is going to be set to start on August 14th with signups now up. We're up to 9 signups, which is
All
a lot more than
right.
I thought so far. So we'll see how
Yeah.
many we actually get. And it is open to everybody, and I will announce the secret theme on the 14th. So
Yes.
definitely.
Everybody, please get in it, join it, yeah, get a team together. We have Josh created the Discord channel specifically for it, looking for teams,
Mhm.
advice. We will both be in there helping and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
for sure.
And as a Pony said in the chat, like every game should be submitted with no volume sliders, no make it just be completely uncapped. I want like 10,000 FPS. Like the
Yeah.
second I hit your game, my computer should just like start sparking because that will be the best way to judge it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But other than that, we have a very sad topic for
Yeah.
this week, and that is a look at the state of game preservation, or maybe I should put quotes in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, let us know
Okay.
if the volume is sounding all right, Chris, because again, it's always weird when we are like messing with settings.
Yeah. Is it my volume? How's
Could be
that? Check.
yours.
Good.
I can always give you a raise
Bump. Yeah.
here. Let me bump you up a little bit, see if that helps. But while we check that out, so
Oh, Rat joined the game jam, so we have 10 entrants now. All right.
but our topic here is about we kind of heard. I sent Josh a piece
Awesome.
from the Video Game History Foundation. They posted this. I guess it would be about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago,
Mhm.
and they did a massive study about what is the state of game preservation, more specifically, the state of being able to play games these
Yeah.
days. And their findings came back saying that 90% of the video games released more than 10 years ago are completely inaccessible to everyone. So we talk about 10 years ago, that will include, well, all the PlayStation 2 games, all GameCube, all Game Boy games,
Oh my
all
gosh.
like every classic video game that people come to know and love is pretty much unplayable. And it is such a horrible thing to hear. And again, like for longtime fans, you know that I am 100% game preservation, game accessibility, game
Mhm.
approachability. And I'll, if I get started here, I'll start ranting for the next 30 minutes. So I'm going to throw over to you first. What do you think about game preservation and also about the state of it is today?
Well, I'm going to start with how I feel about the state right now. I was quite alarmed when I saw that. I think it says almost like 90% of classic games are critically endangered. So they're like critically endangered. I think like 87% are just like completely unreachable, right? And that is not good. That is a massive swath of games that we all love. Like you said, we're talking about every Game Boy game, like PlayStation 1 games. And you go back further. And to me, someone who like this is a very important thing to me. Like I always, game history is a big thing, right? You always want to go back and study it, see what you can learn from the past, and then you can go forward with it. So it's just very alarming. Just to keep it short, and we could keep moving on, but it's just very alarming, and that's all I can say. We keep going from there, Josh. I mean, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, definitely. It is a very like frustrating topic. I know I did a video about why you need to be able to play classic video games, why it's important to play video games rather than just watching videos when it comes to studying it.
Yeah, yeah.
And there are still people out there, and there's I think two big points I want to touch on. So one is about why it's important to be able to have access to these games, and then two on the whole piracy emulation issue, because they're both very different. So again, like to bring back that point about the why you need to play these games, is that it is, well, for first off, it is quite literally the history of the video game industry. And part of having a interactive medium is being able to play it when you should be able to do it. And like we've said, like there are a lot of classic games that do still shine. Again, like Super Mario, all the classic Devil May Cries, even like people will argue, of course, well, who cares about stuff like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Friday the 13th, or pick any, like, 5 or less review score game, but the point isn't just to cherry pick what games we want to represent. Right. Oh, that hurts me, Rats. I think you just hurt me with that line.
With this
Oh, that hurts.
Oh my gosh. See that, and that game is definitely in Smash TV is definitely endangered, right? Mm-hmm. just with that a statement there, Ed.
Yeah. And you need, like, when we talk about what this means, like, so many of our like indie developers are inspired by classic games.
Yes.
When we look at, again, like if there weren't availability of something like Harvest Moon, would we have ever gotten Stardew Valley?
Stardew Valley, right? Like a lot of what I'm working on right now is definitely like came from like the original Devil May Cry's, the first Quake, like. A lot of very, very old games is where I'm going to be taking like a lot of my inspiration from, right? Those were the games that I loved. And so like they still offer so much and they do hold up. Like if you go back and you'd play, I don't know, Quake right now or Devil May Cry, they still do hold up. They are not like, they don't have the same quality of life things and stuff that we do have now, but they offer so much unique experiences that you really can't even find anymore nowadays, right? Like it's not the same experience in any way. They're completely different because of the era that they were created in, right? Just like as like movies, when you watch maybe like a black and white movie, due to the era it was created in, the constraints of the media and all kind of stuff, it's going to be a different type of movie. Right. And then if you watched, so you could take inspiration of that to create your new movie now. Right. So it's basically the same thing. And it's just extremely important to be able to examine the roots of it and seeing like on the other side, thinking about all of these games that were developed and all the hard work. And then they're just going to disappear off the face of the earth unless we do something to preserve them.
Mm-hmm. And as to like Rat's Tale talking about all the bad games, like again, like when we talk about preservation, we need to paint with as broad of a brush or broad as a stroke as we can, because if we start talking about, well, if we only preserve 8 out of 10 games, then it just feels again like we're like the point of preservation is not to cherry pick. I think, in my opinion, it's about making sure that everything is available. And to Chris's point about the MMO genre, that is another big point, especially about
Yeah.
mobile games. Like, there are
Yeah.
a ton of mobile games that have entered EOS over the past decade. And when they're done, that's it. Like, developer will let you play until, the day of the server shut off, but that's it. All the work that went into that game, all the resources, voice acting, art, aesthetics, and all that, it just gets, thrown out and we never hear from it ever again. And that really does not seem right for any kind of like online based game.
Right. And not only that, but like depending on how long the game ran, the amount of time that people put into those games, like a lot of people like play maybe just that one game, right? They're playing that one MMO every day and putting years and years and years into it. And then to shut down like on like how is that right in any way,
Mm-hmm.
like form or fashion, right? That's almost cruel in a way. Like I couldn't imagine like if right now I'm playing Final Fantasy 14 is my current MMO, and if like all of a sudden they hit I don't know some giant financial issues and like we're gonna have to shut it down next month, I would be like I wouldn't know what to do. I'd be like, wow, I invested so much time, and I'd be less likely to invest time in another MMO again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you think about the ramifications later. So even if a studio is like, oh, like same for the studio shuts it down, and then like, okay, they're going to open up another MMO, and I'm going to want to invest time in that other MMO. Probably not, right? So especially for MMOs, like there needs to be something where once it reaches its end of service, that there has to be a way to migrate it over to like private, at least private servers or something that allows the consumers to still play the game, like in some form or fashion, right? There needs to be something that we need to be able to do in that regard.
Mm-hmm. As a very interesting point, I try to keep a buzz on like what's going on like the mobile gotcha scene. Apparently, a mobile game came out last month that in 2 days shut down. Like it literally
Wow.
shut down after 2 days of being up. And again, it's that case where
What
when
was the
it
reason? Did they state a reason?
I'm not quite sure I didn't look too much further into that, but it's a really weird situation where these games, when they go down, that is it. And Chris, I do have a video for Monday about my thoughts on like Diablo 4 and live service design, so be sure
Oh
to
my
check that one
gosh.
out.
I'm gonna have to check that one out because I'm not staying up to date on what's going on with Diablo. So
And when we talk about kind of game preservation like this, again, like people have been really talking about MMOs and the MMO genre for the past
yeah,
20 years. Because again,
yeah,
if something is tied to an always online connection, when that connection gets severed, it's all gone.
it's all gone. Yeah,
And what you said about like for some of these games, like there's someone who maybe that's their only game. That's
that's
the
their only
one
game.
that they played. They build up friends, relationships with it, and it gets shuttered. Where do they go? And it is such a very frustrating thing. And again, like when we talk about like single player and MMO, there are oftentimes two different universes in terms of trying to, make something that is backwards compatible or something that can be preserved. But we have this very big situation of the industry is really behind when it comes to this stuff. And
Mhm.
before I forget, again, I want to bring up Chris's question. What are
Yeah.
your guys' thoughts on games that are neglected, gain a cult following, then receive a re-release slash remaster? One could argue that people are less likely to purchase that re-release since they play it through emulation. And that, like the whole re-release thing, that is something that it kind of gives me like a bad taste in my mouth
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
option. So, what do you think
100.
about before I rant?
Yeah. No. I'm gonna be. I'm gonna agree 100% with you on it. You go with your rant, and I'll go next.
All right. The problem that I have with the whole like cycle of re-release is that it doesn't inherently fix the problem. You're just it's kind of like a sinking boat, and your only option is, well, let's just keep, taking buckets
Putting
and
water.
throwing water out. It
Yeah.
doesn't fix the fact there's a giant hole in the middle of your boat. And
Yeah.
the issue with this, that this is what a lot of people will argue as, this is the right solution. One second. That it's okay for Nintendo to re-release Super Mario World every platform. Or it's okay for us to just wait for them to bring back Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne. And yep, exactly. Like Chris is
Exactly.
typing it as I'm saying it. And
Yeah.
this is a horrible solution because you're just kicking the can down the
Can
street.
down the road. Yeah.
And it doesn't solve the inherent problem that I've played, Super Mario World on like 3 or 4 different platforms by now. Surely at this point, it shouldn't be too much to ask for a permanent option
Right.
to be able to play it. And
Yeah.
as an interesting point, I know Nintendo teamed up with Steam to block the Steam release of the Dolphin emulator on
Yes.
Steam.
Yes. That
and
just happened. Yeah.
that just really hurts me.
I
And
thought I was reading it wrong at first. I was like, "Oh, they were going to allow it." Oh no, of course not. No.
again, the day we're talking about like Khalid right now, the day that we see Nintendo games on Steam like officially released and supported, that's when the death cloud comes in and we're all under the Crimson Blight right there, the Crimson Rot.
There's the Crimson Rot for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. But the like when we're talking about just re-releasing like Mario over and over again and Dark Souls over and over again, like these are not the ones that are in jeopardy, but again, it's also kicking it down the road, right? Because like the purchases of Mario were like what on the 3DS shop, on the Wii U shop, and they shut those down, right? So they shut down the stores anywhere where you can get it, and it's like, oh well, what if the person didn't purchase a Switch, right? So now they purchased it already and they don't have another thing to play it on. So that's kind of the issue, right?
Mhm.
And maybe I have a PlayStation 4, right? And they're going to re-release Bloodborne on PlayStation 5. And do they do that? I don't know. But say they're going to do it. And but I don't have a PlayStation 5 and then they remove it from the PlayStation 4, then I have nothing to play it on, right? That's kind of what we're talking about as in kicking it down the road. We need a much more permanent option, right?
Yep.
So,
and
format rot.
Yep. And again, part of that issue is that the chance of Nintendo saying we're not going to let you play Super Mario World anymore. That is not going to happen. Again, games like Dark Souls, Mario, let me see what's another big one, Halo. Like the chance of these games permanently going away is very minuscule.
Right.
But what we're talking about again are games that didn't sell 20 billion copies, that didn't pull in
Quest.
Yeah.
Friday the 13th.
Cybernator, EVO was mentioned earlier. Like, these are games that deserve to be remembered. Star Control, the original Fallouts. And
yep.
Again, one of the reasons why people want to see these games on the PC is that the PC basically opens them up to almost infinite work by modders and fans, and that's another really big point. Again, like so many of the games that we've seen have been given a second, third, 8th, 20th, 5th life thanks to modders and people trying to make them backwards compatible. My voice is really dying today. Excuse me.
It's like Skyrim will not die because of mods, right? Like there's games that will just never die. Team Fortress 2, like these games that stick around and are given like infinite lives because of the modding. So yeah, definitely, in this, like getting things over to the PC is definitely like a solution that we want to be looking into somehow, some way. With the console games, I'm not sure how we'll talk about that, how it'll work out. But yeah, if you can get everything over to the PC in some way, then that definitely opens things up, like you said.
Yeah. And, oh man. And with a lot of these games that we're seeing this like second, third, fourth life on, I mean, look at the survival horror genre. A lot of the survival horror kind of came back thanks to the independent scene. Thanks to people making their own games, modders, there are people who have made all manner of mods for the Resident Evils, the Silent Hills, and so on. And what's important is that not only is this keeping these games alive, but it's keeping them in like the memory of
Yeah.
a lot of people. Because to Chris's comment about kind of the re-release, remake thing, if people didn't care about Resident Evil, do you think they would have made a Resident Evil 4 remake, or a Resident Evil 2 remake, or a 3 remake, and so on? No. And this is often that excuse that studios will say, well, no one cares about so-and-so game, so why should we try and keep it maintained? Well, nobody cares about it because they've never heard of it, or they have literally no access to see it, play it, or experience it otherwise.
Exactly.
And yet, to Chris's comment about Rock Band, like, I mean, this is
Yeah.
a really good point. Remember, like, in the mid-2000s, like, Rock Band was huge.
Huge.
It was probably one of the defining games of the 2000s.
Yeah, definitely. It was like that and like Call of Duty, or I think that was it. Like,
Yeah. And
it was
like
massive.
And like this is the point with my thumbnail that I went for the old Dark Place meme of I know writers who use subtext are all cowards, but like think of any amazing game that you've played in the past 10 years, and to a lot of companies they view it as just trash.
It's just
Bloodborne
trash,
is trash. Grand Theft Auto is trash. Any Mario game is trash. And if anyone finds that offensive or you want to fight me on it, well, guess what? I'm not the one who's saying that. Take your complaints to Nintendo, Sony, Rockstar.
Microsoft.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because that's how a lot of companies view these games. And even to that point, a lot of consumers, unfortunately, still view games this way, I feel. That a video game is something that you get 8 to 10 hours of entertainment. Maybe it's something you play until you finish it, and then, okay, it's done, and we never hear, see, or speak of it ever again.
I do. I wonder, you're right. I wonder what percentage of consumers, like, see that this game is more than, like, once I'm done, okay, now it's trash. Could, like, consider it that this should live on and be cherished and is more than just its playtime. I wonder what the amount of game it is. I bet it's lower than I'd like to think, huh?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have been given this mentality thanks to, like, Call of Duty, the sports games, where, again, like, you're not going to play Call of Duty 2017, you gotta play Call of Duty 2018. Oh, but then 2019 comes out, so you throw that one out, now we go to 2020. And someone mentioned F-Zero, so I'm sure Pony should be showing up in chat any second now.
Summon Pony. That's how you summon Pony.
Yeah, and you can summon me by just screaming about game preservation. And Rat's Tail brought up, like, the DS. Like, again, my 3DS broke. I got it mostly repaired. But, like, the 3DS is a very big platform. I mean, the whole DS line, we could argue, really gave JRPGs a second life in the 2000s. Because, for those of you who don't know the history, a lot of studios went to the DS and then to the 3DS as a cheaper alternative to develop these games on. So, series like The World Ends With You, Etrian Odyssey, Golden Sun, the WarioWare games, and many others, Advance Wars, Fire Emblem. That franchise that everyone is, going gaga over, it nearly died. And I can tell you that it would not have gotten a chance over here if not for the... Actually, I think it was on the Advance originally. Like, the very first one was over here on the Advance.
Yeah.
And this is that point, like... And then Nintendo just saying, well, we're not going to support anymore. What does that leave? Like, 5 different platforms, and we go all the way back to the original Game Boy, worth of content.
Yeah.
And like we said, like, someone will come in and say, well, we'll just wait for Nintendo to put it up on the eShop. That is, one...
No, not going to happen.
It doesn't, solve the problem right now. 2, it still leaves a lot of games that were built entirely around the 3DS you can't really play that. Like, again, it's kind of Nintendo's double-edged sword. When you look at stuff like the Wii and the Wii U and stuff along those lines, they're unique, but it also makes it incredibly painful to try and emulate.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how do you emulate the 3DS touchscreen interface on a game on a keyboard and mouse?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Due to their very strange hardware within all of those like DS's variants, it makes it hard to emulate. Emulating the Wii is quite a pain. Like, with the movement, and is it which one? Which one had the Wii? Yeah, the Wii, where you had those, like emulating those. That's difficult on the PC. So
Yeah. And we have so many like fantastic games that they deserve to be remembered, and more importantly, we are, as an industry, I think, way past the point of not having a permanent, solution or a safe place to be able to play these games. And
definitely.
I mean, the PC has GOG, and GOG was never going to be like the next Steam killer. But it's the place where you can buy these games, you can legitimately buy these games, and then have them for the rest of your life.
Yep.
And this is, I think, there's another point about this that really does roll me the wrong way. I hate the idea of games like this becoming just collector's items. That you're not buying the game to play, you're not buying the game to experience it. You're basically buying a $700 box for your shelf.
Yeah.
And that to me is the wrong way of talking about game preservation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, something more along the line of like GOG with some sprinkle in some legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we might be getting there, Steam, GOG legislation.
Yeah.
And then you might be getting close to something. And then you'd have to tackle, of course, the online games. So when they reach an end of service, and then my idea was that, of course, once a game reaches its end of life, that you hand over the server architecture, and then you just open source it. You're like, you're not using it anyway, right? You've literally closed it, so just open source the server architecture, and then the fans can run a server and have that. And that's probably one of the only things you can do with online service. There might, of course, could be other ideas, but that's just the ones that I've been thinking about. And some of those might help solve it right there.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, like being able to have like a solution, like there has to be a point where a game is no longer considered like market friendly or a marketable product, I guess is the way.
Right.
And like we were saying, like there's some people, and I've had developers argue with me on this on Twitter, who say that, oh, you just want to pirate whatever's the latest game. No. I want to be able to play a game for 20, 25 years ago. Yeah. And more importantly, I don't want to have to spend $800 just to play a game that, there may only be like a few thousand people who ever even heard of this game. And this is, again, the point about game preservation, is about giving access to something that it is not marketable anymore. And again, this is why I'm not a huge fan of the whole re-release, remake, or remaster kind of argument, because it only works for a minuscule of video games. That, again, not every video game is going to receive the remaster treatment. And some games, as we saw, like what they try to do with like the Final Fantasy ones, it can come out looking worse.
Yeah. So for every Final Fantasy re-release and for every Mario re-release, there's like going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of games that are not going to be, that won't be re-released, right? It's just the amount of games for one. It's like if you see one roach, you have 1,000 in the wall. Well, it's like you're going to have your one video game, but there's 1,000 that you'll never see. So.
Yep. And it's why that you can't just rely on the company being like the one who's going to solve this problem.
No, 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 no. They're going to be the last one. I mean, I was literally this morning. I was reading in Texas, Stanley. What is it, Black and Stanley or Craftsman? They opened up a building, to build tools and everything. They shut it down. Like they broke ground 3 years ago and they shut it down. And so they were like trying to It's like if it doesn't make profit, they will kill it. They will. It doesn't matter whatever it is. Like it doesn't matter if it's for for press or for this or that. If it's not making money, it doesn't matter. If it's not marketable, it doesn't matter. It's total trash to them. So we cannot depend on companies to do that. And now also just to keep in everybody's mind that Microsoft is going to own like almost like a huge swath of like studios and stuff like that. And so Microsoft is going to have a say for a lot of these games, and they're going to be like, nah, it's not worth it. We don't, they're not going to be interested in that. So the companies are not going to be the one that are going to do it. It's going to have to be us, the legislation, and just ground roots, and it's going to have to be us that it's doing it. Really,
the reason why legislation is very important in all of this is that part of what makes this very hard is how rights are divvied up and who owns what when it comes to a lot of these games. When I interviewed Farsight, this would be like last decade, about the pinball arcade, they talked about, again, like the nightmare it can be in order to get the rights to emulate a pinball table, especially if it is something that's based on a property.
Yeah.
When I interviewed, her name was Katie, I think, who worked on the King's Quest fan game, they also talk about this nightmare of, well, if we get the copyright from a studio, but then that studio gets sold to someone else, our original contract can become null and void. Because, the other studio is just taking on that IP. And games like No One Lives Forever that everyone keeps talking about. And even the stuff about altering or taking out stuff in games, like the Grand Theft Auto games, any game where there's, licensed music or, digitalized actors or stuff like that. And again, the problem is that there is no direct litigation about this, because video games, again, occupy their own rule. If we talk about film or TV show, usually those rights are kind of considered part of that specific product, until like the end of time or throughout the universe. Video games don't work under those same rules, and they really should at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're pretty far in. We're still in the infancy, but we're far enough in where these rules the legislation should be put in place, because you shouldn't be having these problems, right? We're like, okay, well, we licensed the song for so long, or we licensed this actor for so long, and now we can't have it, right? It's like, it should be the same as in a movie, because even though it's a different medium, it still has kind of the same things that are used. Like, we're still using similar things, right? Audio, actors, etc. So those should, that legislation should already be here. We should be working on it. Maybe we're gonna have to run, Josh. One of us is gonna have to run.
There we go. That'll be my next project after the game jam. And when we talk about, like, to Chris's comment about, like, emulators or people, like, trying to do this, the problem is that it's one of those cases where you have to work on something in such complete secret that they can't find out about it beforehand, because then they'll just shut you down, or, Nintendo will send all the lawyers after you.
Yeah.
But it still needs to be big enough that people know about it and hear about it. But not before, Kotaku, like, screams about it and then ruins it for everyone.
I think they've done it for a few of them. They're like, check out this new fan-made one. And I'm like, no, 2-3 years later, cease and desist.
And it shouldn't be considered bad to preserve these games. And again, like, we see this from a lot of consumers who get very defensive over, whatever company or studio they like. And they view this as a win, but it really isn't. Because, like, for one, it also closes off being able to play these games to people who only have the money. who can
Yeah.
spend lots and lots on, a classic console, classic whatever, and so on. And it doesn't really, again, it's also why I'm not a huge fan of the whole collector scene. I
Yeah,
don't
me
want to
neither.
own, a box of a game and never open it, and never play it. And it's again why a lot of us have gone to Steam, have gone to GOG for the
Yeah.
PC side. But even then, that's still not the all-encompassing solution to this.
Honestly, because these games that I have sitting right here, because they're in, they get played less, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because they're in a box and I have to take them out because I'm so used to everything. Just if it's on my computer, I'm going to play it on the version on Steam. I'll play that one before I pull out this version, right? So yeah, it makes sense. I'm not big. I don't like collect, but I just had to buy some of these. But yeah, ending up in boxes and ending up in auctions, I mean, that's just money, 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 and it just sits there. And
Mm-hmm.
only I get to play these games, right? Nobody else gets to. If they were lost, they only are here in my room. So it's yeah,
Yep.
that's not cool.
I mean, we look at stuff like there was a time where stuff like Sim Meier's Alpha Centauri was going for like $800 for a box of it. Panzer Dragoon Saga was like several $1,000s on the Sega Saturn.
Jeez.
And
Wow.
some people say, well, that's good business, that's good money. But the thing is, like, that means no one gets to play those games, no one gets to
Mm-hmm.
experience them. And that's kind of the point of video games, is to be able to experience them.
Right.
And like we've said, like, just watching footage is not the same. You're only getting half to a quarter of the story just by watching someone else play. You're never going to learn what the UI UX of a game is just by watching footage of it on stream.
Yeah, the game feel, the juice,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. You can't really. That doesn't really come across, right? Like, how does the game feel in your hand, and how does it play? In some time, and like a lot of the times, a lot of like just because a game is an older game does not mean that it doesn't hold up like gameplay wise. It doesn't mean it doesn't have massive lessons to teach you. It's like they might have solved a problem that no one solved before, and that was the first time solving it. And then from there, they set the standard, and it's like, well, why did they set the standard in that game, right? So let me take a look at it. And you still always being able to go back and experience every single game is super important for the history of our games and for game development. For game development to go forward and to be the best it can be, we have to be able to go back and review all those games. Like there's so many games right now while I'm working on my games that I'd like to go and just check out and play a little bit of it, but it's so difficult to get to them and to get it right.
Yep.
Sometimes even with emulation, it doesn't emulate right. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's also another bummer. Like so.
And yeah, to Rat's Tale's comment about peripherals, yeah, that's another really big point.
Yeah.
The Super Scope. Who remembers the Super Scope for
I
the
do.
SNES?
I bought it. I got it. Like first day.
I have one
Is
around here that I could
you
like
got
use
it,
as a
Josh? You still
club.
have yours?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Stuff like VMUs for the Dreamcast.
VMUs, yes, VMUs.
And to
Power Glove.
Yep. Chris mentioning, of course, all the Rock Band stuff. Like,
yeah.
there's so many like hard ways to get access to these peripherals, and one of the interesting
DDR.
Oh yes, DDR. All the GunCon games. You remember them from like the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 side.
Yep. The Saturn ones too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who make like third-party versions of these things, but I think it's a great band-aid fix. But the problem is they're very much not known in the mainstream. And when we talk about emulation and the P word in a few minutes, we'll come back to that one. One thing that I would love to get, and want to get me like a birthday present, I would love the Analog, which is kind of like a homebrew like 3DS, DS like handheld device that's supposed to be.
Is it the one that you have to crank, or is that another one?
Different one. But
okay.
Yeah, that one also looks cool too. But yeah, like people who can put together like, and that's one of the things I wanted like Nintendo to do. Like say that okay, we're not going to make any new DSs. just give me like one more. Give me like that one platform that kind of gets rid of, the issue of trying to find these parts. What was I about to say? Like if you remember the whole like SNES Mini, Sega Genesis Mini, like there's that
Mm-hmm,
period where
mm-hmm.
people went crazy over those. Again, people want easy access to these games, and more importantly, they want affordable access. I'm still pissed off that Nintendo like kind of gave up and said, "Oh, we'll just let the scalpers who want to sell like a SNES Mini for like $10,000, let them just buy 57 copies, or let's just buy our own stock."
Yeah.
Like this, I think gets at one of the major points. Like game preservation is not the same as game collection. As in, I'm not buying these games because I want to turn around and sell them for 8 times the markup. I want to be able to buy a game and know that in 20 years from now, I can still have access to it. Hell, how about just 5 years from now?
Right. Indeed.
Yeah,
That's some games. Yeah, here's a yeah, I got the SNES Classic right here. And then
nice.
also like they had, when you were talking about like the Super Nintendo, it's like the PS1s, like the smaller PlayStation, right? That they were
Mhm.
doing like toward the end of the life cycle to be like, okay, here's the final version of it, so you could still play all the PlayStation 1 games again, but still that's the same thing about it brings up the collector's issue, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, like here's the fun thing. If I look up the SNES Classic right now, a new version of it is going for like several $100s.
oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, and like this is just so frustrating as someone who believes in like the game industry and believes in preservation. Yep, and yeah, to Melwinnie's comment, like all the here's a fun point. One of the games I never got to play was SimCity Societies. It was the only game from Tickle Mill that I never got a chance to play. I bought it off of EA,
Oh,
off of Origin, and guess what? I can't play anymore because they turned off the authentication server.
vacation. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the only
there's a few games I played. I can't remember which game I was trying to play and to authenticate. It's like you can't authenticate. Yeah.
yeah,
So
and this is again like we talk about the PC side being better. It's better, but it's still nowhere near like acceptable levels. There's still a lot of PC games that you cannot play, simply by just installing them on
yeah.
your computer. Again,
Yeah.
during like the 90s, like people thought the heights of a PC could be maybe 3 megabytes of RAM. That was considered, top of the line at one point. And GOG has done a phenomenal work, but it's still not enough. And some people may say they were being greedy, but it's not really greedy to ask for, games that, again, like most people they're not interested in spending $60 to be able to play Fallout 2.
Right.
So why are people still holding on to these games as just keeping them from everyone else? Hmm. I'm sure there are. I know Sea of Heroes has private servers as well, or there may be.
Oh
And
man, I remember The Sims Online. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Wow. Quake 3 Arena moved online. I wonder if this server still exists. I think they do.
And
Maybe.
speaking about like the MMO side again, like the 2000s, we talked about the MMO gold rush and then the bust of it. How many of those MMOs that try to legitimately do something different are literally unplayable now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Auto, I was about to say as Chris typed it in, Auto
Auto
Assault,
Wildstar.
um, yeah, WildStar, Earth and Beyond. What was some other ones? I know there's like the Matrix
The
Online,
Matrix. There's so many. There's so many.
but I think this is a good point to also bring up the piracy debate or the emulation debate. Because some people will argue, well, who cares if Nintendo doesn't want to keep supporting so and so or EA? Just rip it. Just go the pirate route or the emulation route. And this is again like where we get to this issue when it comes to game preservation. It's still creating a barrier for people to experience these games. If I want to experience like a classic arcade game, I have to download MAME. I need to find, a place that I can't tell you exactly where to get the ROMs for it. And there's of course no guarantee I'm not going to get 27 viruses from going to these websites.
Right.
And again, like the emulation side is, they're doing fantastic work. The people who are making these emulators, who have been supporting MAME and SNES, the one that I use, and many others, they have done a fantastic job of creating the software that can be used. But again, it's still that issue of you have to know someone who knows someone who knows exactly where to go to get the right ROMs to avoid the viruses and set everything up. It's still keeping it out of the hands. And this is again this is the exact reason why Nintendo blocked the Dolphin emulator from Steam. Because Steam is a legitimate store. And Steam as a platform has done so much to remove a lot of the guesswork and hoops to jump through to play some of these games. You don't have to go to some third-party random site with like a Russian website. If I want to download a mod to a Steam game, go to Workshop, search, hit the button. In 5 seconds, it's installed, it's in, we're done. Yep, and yes, Two Rats comment, it's still not a perfect solution. It's the best one we have right now, but it still doesn't fix a lot of these issues. Give up, yeah? And like I'm still trying to get them, and again, that's something we can't be talking too much about, the struggles of trying to get some of these games available, at least on a stream/recording. But that is inherently the problem with this. There are games that there is literally no way to play them otherwise. I mean, and that's not hyperbole. There are lots of games that you can't find them literally anywhere else. And again, it brings up that question. What do you do? Like, if you can't play this game because it's not available on any modern platform, it hasn't been, put into any modern online store, where do you go?
Yeah, man, that is really the problem. And I mean, it's just like, and then like when we were talking about like, like emulation, it's like how many people like want to go through all of that? Like, first of all, the technical hurdle, right? If you can get past the technical hurdle, and then you can get past the virus hurdle, and you can get past like the legal hurdle, and then want to set it all up, like it's a lot of rigmarole, a lot of jump through just to get like your emulator up and running. And like you said, they've made amazing, like, I mean, even for I think the Switch, like that's even being emulated pretty well with like a Cusa emulator and the Dolphin One emulator. Like those are all doing really well. But again, you have to go through to get the ROMs or the games. You have to go through some other sites, right? And those, that makes it a little difficult, and it makes it a little illegal. So like, there needs to be a legal way to do it, and an easier way. Like if I could just go to Steam and get your ROMs there, that would be fine, right? That would be a lot easier, and that would work, right? But we would need, of course, we need legislation. We need something to help with that.
Yep, and to the point we were talking about earlier about like kind of like end of life for some of these games, like there should be like an established end of life period for a game. That, if the game is like 10 plus years old at this point, no one who is kind of like the consumer or general consumer games is going to want that game. And again, like it's both good and bad in this respect. It's bad because, again, like to Juan's comment, that a lot of people only view video games through the AAA standard. That, if it's not Red Dead Revolution, or if it's not Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, who cares? But that also means that if there's no money in it, then it shouldn't be that hard to get the rights to
Exactly.
make this available. And again, like from a hardware side, like there should be a market for being able to make and recreate these games.
Definitely.
Like, why can't someone go and create like Game Boy cartridges? Like, get approval from Nintendo. I mean, imagine that amount of money that Nintendo is like leaving off the floor. Someone saying,
Right.
"I will pay you." You know, like the same kind of licensing fee and production fee of, 20, 30 years ago, so I can sell these games, so I can make cartridges again, or make it for my own platform. Like, there's a lot of solutions here, but they're just very hard to, get through the door because of the legitimacy problem.
Mhm.
I think it's Megacat Studios who I spoke to. They actually make, like, to Chris's comment, they make versions of their game for like NES, or they make it for the Wonder Swan, or for the TurboGrafx, and that is really great. But again, it also makes that market so small. Because how many people have a working TurboGrafx 32? Or a Sega 32X? How many Sega 32X fans do we have watching this right now?
Any Atari Lynx fans out there?
How about Atari Jaguar? How many of you
Atari
have a...
Jaguar.
I have my 3DO. I still have it. I can
You
play
get
games
3DO?
at the, whopping speed of like 6 frames per second.
Man, that's awesome.
And again, like, to Ratz's comment about like the years, again, like, the problem is setting that standard. Because, and this is what I think a lot of studios are fighting tooth and nail against. Because once we say, okay, after 10 years, this game must go open source, or 15 years, or whatever, that's it. Like, that becomes a line of control that the studios will lose forever. And they obviously don't want that. Again, Nintendo wants to keep selling Super Mario World until the sun goes out.
See, but the thing is like if they want to, okay, so they can re-release it again, right? There's like no problem. Like if it's like 20 years, they could still re-release it on their own platform, right? Like that wouldn't stop them from doing it, but it's still open source. So if someone would want to buy it officially from Nintendo, they could, and then also the open source version. They would really hinder it being re-released again from Nintendo. I don't believe, right?
Yeah, it shouldn't, but again, I don't think they see it that way. And yeah, like, my thoughts is that if you want to keep supporting this product for as long as you want and making it available, go for it. But if you don't want to do it, or if it's not financially viable for you, then it should be given to someone else who can do that. And to Juan's comment about like Onimusha and stuff like that, again, like, this is, I think, the point that a lot of studios are thinking, which is incorrect. They think that a Game of the Year winning game from 1997 should earn Game of the Year winning money of 2023. It doesn't work that way. And
yeah, Winnie the Pooh. Yeah,
yeah.
just became.
And
So I was just, oh, sorry, I just was looking this up. So for public domain, it takes about 70 years on average for something to be public domain. So hopefully we're not going with that, because we'll never get the games back at that rate.
And as a worse point, by the time they become public, who knows where the rights of that game is?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a nightmare to play a game from 5 years ago, to play a game from 10 years ago. I know I'm being greedy when I say that we shouldn't make it difficult to play Super Nintendo games, or even GameCube games. And we can't rely just on re-releases, because, again, the problem that people have with the re-release is that they expect the re-release to be good, if not better, than that original game. But like Juan said, like, a lot of consumers, they don't want to just play a game from 1997 or 2001. if you're going to do a re-release,
Yeah.
you should. It has to be worth it. It
Yeah.
has to be like, again, smoothing out a lot of those pain points and wrinkles in that design. And studios don't want to do that work. And, I do understand that. But again, it's that same breath of, well, if you don't want to do that work, I'm not going to give you $60 from a game for 30 years ago. Let me see. And
Pong is 51 years old?
now I get to
Really?
feel
No.
really old.
No, I don't believe that.
And like when we look at stuff like the Persona remake that they just released, like it was like a worse version of it that is missing features
Yeah.
that they don't have. And the point is they said, well, we don't have access to that stuff anymore. But I want to turn around and say, well, why don't you have access
You have
to that
access
stuff?
to it. Yeah, exactly. And I mean that's the thing is like re-releases aren't like they're not the same. Like they are not the same, right? Because due to limitations that it is never like a one-to-one. I don't think I've ever played like a one-to-one release. And then of course a remaster is completely different, but I've never played a one. Josh, have you played one where it was just like, okay, this is a perfect re-release of this old game? I don't think I have.
Yeah, not really. And again, like the classic games are going to have inherent issues with it based on that time, but that's kind of the point.
That's the point. Yeah, that's the whole point.
It is about seeing these games where they're available. And you can't. And again, like when we see stuff like Night Dive that they re-release, Shadow Man, System Shock. I think they're working on another one right now. That is great, but in a way, you can't just rely on someone making a big budget remake or a remaster of every single classic game. I'm sure there's a studio out there that is dying to remaster Jaws.
Oh yeah.
Let me see.
Josh, how'd you know that's after Samurai Pig? That's what I'm going to be working on next.
There
my
you
Jaws
go.
remaster. I had too many nightmares from that game, and I want to spread the nightmare to others.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like to once come, there's also that point too, like about trying to remove any kind of problematic games, about games that didn't do right, or like I'm sure Nintendo or I'm sure like Konami doesn't want people to remember like Simon's Quest, which was like considered one of the worst games.
Yeah.
But again, the point about preservation is that it has to preserve everything. And
do you mean Fester's Quest or Simon's Quest?
Simon's Quest.
Okay, Simon's Quest.
But Fester's Quest as well. And as a point, I'm going to be interviewing one of the people from Digital Eclipse this week, Chris Kohler. I don't know if we're doing it live or recorded at the moment, but they've been doing these kinds of collections. They did the Atari 50th Anniversary Collection. They did the Cowabunga. Really? They're doing the Making of Karateka Collection. And like their whole mindset is like trying to turn these games into interactive museums. And I think like that to me is like the platinum standard of a remaster. That's not just the game, you get the entire history behind that game. And that would be like, that is like, shooting for the stars dream.
Yeah.
Of kind of game preservation. I'm not foolish enough to think that every game is ever going to get that. But again, part of the challenge of what we need to do is we have to make it a legitimate option to preserve these games. Not something that is only available if you go to a museum in person, and spend $100 plus travel expenses. Or the other way, go to a black market site, buy all the ROMs you want, make sure you scan everyone with your antivirus, and play them like that.
Indeed.
I'm still want to play the Cowabunga collection with people too. We never get people with it.
I'm down to play it. I'm down to play that one. I'm gonna do that one. We should do it the other night, Saturday.
Yep, I'm all for it. And again,
I thought you already did it. That's why.
I played it, but no one showed up, so it was just me.
Oh. Okay.
But yeah, I don't want to play multiplayer when you get that going. And yeah, like when we look at, yeah, exactly, Chris. There's the cyberpunk future.
Yeah, dark alleys, man.
And like we are saying, while having these kinds of like master, like remaster, like museum level stuff is great, there still needs to be like again like the ultimate goal of what I think game preservationists need to be shooting for is making it mainstream and legitimate. Not like again like this is not the industry or this is not the section for people trying to make billions of dollars. Like that's not the goal. We've talked a lot about this being the analog to libraries. And
Yeah.
we do need, I think, like video game librarians. We need
Yes.
a way for someone to be able to play a game and not have to worry about viruses. Like imagine being able to go to a website and downloading, a legitimate way of playing Milton's Secret Castle for the NES. And again, it could be something that is just like we could even make it like almost like a rental, or like imagine having like we talk about the whole thing about like, NFTs and trying to make like copies of digital stuff like lock like that. Why not do something like with game preservation? Like that would shut people up and say, well, I'm going to have 10 legitimate copies of this classic game that I will rent you or loan you. You have to give it back to me. And yes, we're kind of going back to the blockbuster game rental model. But if we can do that for classic games, make it completely legitimate as a way of allowing access to these games, I think that would at least be a small step in the right direction.
Definitely. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the blockbuster model. It's fun.
Visual preservation.
Gamefly with classics. There you go.
And again, like that's really like GOG was basically like we're a digital store for all those games that you literally can't play anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they charge again like a classic game should be maybe like I would say like $5 to $10 a pop at like the most. But again, like it's important to understand where the audience is for these games. Like this is not the audience of the same people who are going to buy a new Call of Duty every year.
No, not at all.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's when we. There is a dystopian future, Chris. People who hunt down the people who steal these games, like that movie Repo Men.
Yeah.
You stole Chrono Trigger, we're taking your lungs.
Perfect. I like it.
And I'm trying to think if there's anything else because we could easily just be going around in a circle here.
Yeah, I know. It's running circles.
Yet again, like it does require a neutral third party, as Juan said, and that, like again, I think there's three pillars of this. One is litigation. We need to have it like in the books about being able to get these games. We need to make this mainstream. We need to make it again like getting a classic video game should be just like going to a library. Rent a book, take it out, whatever. And then the third thing is that it has to come from a place of neutrality. And this is again why major studios are not the answer to this. No matter how great Nintendo is at letting you play some classic games, sometimes the solutions we're looking for don't have an expiration date. And that's what these studios want. They won't be able to say, oh, we'll sell it to you while this platform is available for the next 4 or 5 years. And then when the next platform comes along, well, you can give us another $10 for it. Or again, like the whole rental, like I don't agree with a subscription fee for this. Like what Nintendo does with like their options. It should be very much if I want to give you $4.99, $6.99, whatever, I want that copy of the game in my collection forever.
Indeed. Like you were saying earlier, with with legislation, mainstream, and like I thought of, an idea like maybe like GOG, something like that. And so like for each game, say it's for an NES, right? You just download it and the game is like packaged in an XE that already has the emulator in there. So you don't have to like run or download the emulator. Do you know what I'm saying? You just download the game and it's all together and that's it. Boom. right? Like something like that. So that would be good. But like we're definitely going to need a neutral entities here because, like we were talking about earlier, Microsoft munching up, and everybody munching everybody up. Going to be of players that are really going to care about this, and so it's going to be left up to us, legislation, neutral parties, and then we have to make it mainstream. Like dead, we got to take it out of the darkness and really like extol like why this is so important for the future of gaming and for the past of gaming, right? Like we don't want to like burn like the golden age of gaming. We don't want the golden age of gaming.
I mean, again, if you want to feel old, Demon Souls is now over 10 years old.
Gosh.
Mm-hmm. And again, like, that is kind of like the point. Like, think of any amazing video game that you played in the past year. In 10 years from now, a lot of people will view that as trash.
Yep.
Tears of the Kingdom is just some old, crap that deserves to be in the trash can. That's a sentence taken out of context. I'm sure all the Nintendo fans will love to hear.
Yeah, you're just gonna get clips. That's just gonna get clipped, Josh.
Yeah, someone clip that. Just like post that on the Tears of the Kingdom Twitter feed.
There you go.
Again, like you look at all of our amazing games, and if we want to treat video games as art, there has to be a way of preserving art. And the problem, again, that video games have had is that you can't experience a video game like a painting. If I want to Google the Mona Lisa, or, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, I can do that. Am I getting 100% of what it's like to see that? No, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to get like 80 to 90% of that.
Yeah.
And
the same thing for films.
Yep.
And the same thing for books. Like, you just scan a book, boom, it's up there digitally forever. Film, you can put it digitally, put it on a DVD, put it in all kind of different formats, and you can watch it on all. It's like this is the only format that it is so locked down in so many ways. So
and there has to be, as we said, like these limitations are unique to video games, so there has to be a unique solution for it.
Indeed.
And let's see, a few comments like once at libraries. Yeah, we've seen that, and that is definitely where we get into the political side of things. And it is very frustrating when people deem something as not being correct, and again, like this is why I'm always hesitant when people try to kind of whitewash history like that. Like the point of history is to preserve it warts and all.
Yep.
And this goes back to a point that Josh just said about, have like the EXE tied to an emulator, like make it no fuss, no muss. Because what we're talking about in terms of mainstreaming it, a general consumer is not going to know, understand, or care about messing with, the emulator settings or the speed settings and make sure that's perfect. But the people who do that, they don't care about this. And it's that same point about demystifying the impact of piracy. A lot of people who will pirate games, they were never going to be your audience to begin with. And if you think that piracy is the doom and gloom that ruined your game, most likely it's not. And that's what we were kind of talking about with kind of game emulation and game preservation, that making it legitimate is not going to destroy a game company. Nintendo is not going to go under because people are able to play A Boy and His Blob from the NES today.
Exactly.
Let's see. And to Rascon about when's the game collections when you die? I assume when I die, my collection will be kind of like the prize in like a gladiatorial arena in the dystopian future where video games are now currency.
That's
my
right.
collection will be like, you must battle in the 100-man battle royale, and the winner will get my Steam collection.
That's a huge Steam collection, by the way.
Yeah.
In case anybody's wondering.
It is, and that's why, and whoever gets that collection will be king in the new world.
Definitely.
Oh, I
That's
know.
Gonna be a battle.
I know, it'll be like the the story of One Piece. That my my Steam library will be the collection that you must go find, and whoever does will become the Pirate King. There we
Perfect.
go. Let's see. Anything else? Yep, and again, like, Two Rats is kind of about like Link to the Past, and so I'm like, again, like what we're talking about, and that's like another misconception that a lot of people have. Like, what we're talking about in terms of game preservation, we're not playing, what's another weird NES game? We're not playing Snake Rattle and Roll every single
Hey,
day for the rest of our lives. It's
my jam.
again, like the point of this is having it available, so that when we do want to play, we're not having to hunt it down and spend hundreds of dollars, or even in some cases thousands of dollars, to be able to experience it. Nor should we really need to. There's again, like the PlayStation 2 is considered like one of the golden ages
Mhm.
of the game industry. Most of those games are not playable. I still would like to go back and replay Parasite Eve sometime. And
That would be great. And I mean, have you ever tried emulating a PlayStation 2 game?
no, the furthest I've done is N64, thanks to
Yeah.
Thor.
Yeah, the PlayStation, just because that's it. That starts getting a little odd, like the game sizes and a little larger, and it's even more, and like, I don't know, for some reason, like PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 emulation is very difficult to deal with, just with disk sizes and everything. So you're like downloading 1,000 gigabytes, and it's like, oh well, that one doesn't work, or that.
Yeah,
So it's very difficult, and no one wants to do that. That's what we're talking about.
yeah. But yeah, like imagine if, and like we talked about this, like with like companies like hiring people to do this. Why can't like Sony put out like a bounty, or say that we will work with a team to make an emulated for software for PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1 games. Like, we don't want to do it. Why can't they hire someone to have that option? Because again, like part of this is the technology or the hardware hurdles, and then there's the litigation hurdles that go with it. And the only way we're going to get past that is by having proper protection in place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why can't there be a GOG equivalent of, NES to N64 era games? Why can't there be, something like that? Like, oh man, this reminds me, when I talked with Chris this way, I need to ask him about the challenge of the Atari collection. How was it trying to get all the paperwork in order to do that?
That sounds like a nightmare.
And
Yeah, when you said Atari, I was like, oh my gosh, how did he pull that off?
yeah. And I think, like, here's like the interesting. I'm looking at the Atari collection on Steam. It is priced at $40, which is very high for it. But I think they're able to justify that with like kind of like the museum quality that's there. Sometimes I can't know their own games currently. Yeah. I mean, when Dark Souls was released on PC, the original version, it took a modder to make
Yep.
make it actually playable on PC. And yeah, like it shouldn't be that big of a deal today to be able to get access to these games, and there is a market for it. But the problem is that it is both a limited market, and it's a finite one as well. Because again, like this only works for the four games that have already been out. Like, it's not about making a new game for a Nintendo or a Super Nintendo, because we've seen any developers will do that. But we need to have a way to be able to experience these games, and again, experience it in a mainstream and legitimate way. And one other point, and then I'll have to rest my voice for a second. One of the things that we're seeing, like a lot of people doing with like games thanks to speedrunning, is we're seeing a growing mod culture behind them. There are Legend of Zelda Link to the Past randomizers. There is the Legend of Zelda Super Metroid randomizer combined game. We're seeing randomizers for Resident Evil 1 through 3. Being able to experience these games has given them new life, and also means giving studios a chance to keep or come up with new ideas of how to show these games off. Like, why isn't there like a legitimate randomizer for, a Legend of Zelda game. Why can't we see like more of these options be integrated by major studios if there is a market for it? And I think like the whole speedrunning culture, I think, has also shown a light on these games, much like the boomer shooter craze that we're in.
Yeah. And like you said, it'll just give more life and keep it in like everyone's mind and keep it, the game like there's really no downside for keeping it active and keeping it in the speedrunning community and keeping it alive. There's no downside to it at all. Like even if you're not there's marketing and just having the name out there, right? Like for eons down the line, the game property, the IP is still being mentioned and still being brought up constantly, right? I mean, I don't see what a downside to that. Why wouldn't they be interested in it? Right?
And I think, like, in the long run, this would help in terms of keeping the market viability for new entries.
Yep.
Because, again, like, we talk about a lot of these classic games. How are you going to get people to care about a new game in that entry if the last copy of it was 30 years ago and no one's ever heard of it?
But if instead it's that the speedrunning community has been going crazy about it for the last 8 years and now a new version is going to come out, well, okay, well, maybe there's something to it, and it'll definitely help keep the new title easier to release. People will know about it still. I mean, I just think it's win-win.
Yep. So I think I'm about out of thoughts. Anything from you before we?
I think I'm out of thoughts here too. I mean, I think we've covered everything here. Let me check over my notes here.
Let's see.
Yeah, that's about it, Josh.
I think Two Rats Come does that deserve. I think again, like anything deserves preservation these days, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah,
and
all games,
because this is how we learn about what to do and what not to do. And there are plenty of exactly, Chris. It's going to take a lot of work to do this. And if anyone watching this who does game preservation wants to come on for a chat, let me know. I will always love to have you on. But to kind of begin to wrap up my thoughts on this, game preservation is something that is very much like an on or off kind of deal. That we have to either legitimize it or it's not going to get better on its own. And for the whole like games as art crowd, like you should be, screaming from the rafters on this topic, because you can't say that video games are art and then the same breath say, well, who the hell cares about Celeste? Or who cares about Dark Souls 3? Or Super Mario Odyssey? Because you have to treat video games like as a whole in this space, much like classic literature, like classic art. Let's see. I know I interviewed GOG like a super long time ago. Like this would be like 10 years ago. But I haven't spoken to them since. That could be an interesting topic to get them back on for.
Yeah, definitely timely, Josh.
Mm-hmm. And I did reach out to the Video Game Foundation, but I haven't heard anything back from them. Hopefully the email went through. I may bug them again. But again, it's that issue where it's not going to get better on its own. And the consumer and kind of people who care about game space should be making a louder cry about this. Like, there needs to be a solution, because every, year that this goes by, more and more games are disappearing. And there really shouldn't be an excuse. Like, video games came around right at the start of the digital era.
Yeah.
And physical game preservation. I think for me, the answer is going to have to be digital in order to play these games. Unless there's like special circumstances, like, games like DDR, 3DS titles, or just DS titles. But again,
unless there's like a hardware, go ahead. Unless there's like a hardware limitation, I think that digital is the only way. Because once we get physical, then we're getting into the collector's market, like Josh was talking about, and then that's when the games are going to be selling for $1,000 or whatever, and it's for a limited few, and that really just shrinks the market of people that are allowed to play it. So.
Mm-hmm. And at some point, we could look into having physical re-releases or physical stuff of it. But that, I think, opens up another Pandora's box that we're not quite ready to get to. Yeah. Yeah, and I do think on the physical side, being able to reproduce cartridges, being able to have why can't there be a officially licensed third party Super Nintendo? Like imagine getting a Super Nintendo that works on HD TVs that has been built to work on that, and that the cartridges are still available, and that we could keep that around. Again, I know some people, I'm pretty sure someone has made this already, that kind of every console that, it can put you put a cartridge in, a Super Nintendo cartridge, a PlayStation 1 disc, a NES cartridge, it downloads it to the console, and it's there. Retron, yes. Is that the one that I was thinking of? Let's see.
Where is it? The Polymega?
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. And I think there was one that was mentioned on Polygon as well.
Yeah,
but
yeah, looking at the Polygon article. Yeah, it's Polymega is what I'm seeing.
Is that the one? Let's see. Polymega. Yeah, I think this is it. Release date, introduction price of $450.
Yeah, NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, 3DX, 32X, TurboGrafx 16.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sega CD, Neo Geo. Wow. Sega Saturn.
Mm-hmm. And I think that in the perfect world, or I think that would be a good step forward. Why can't a Nintendo or a Sony have a officially licensed third-party reseller or seller of these games? That would open up a lot of the door to making this more mainstream. Have a company that specializes in making a up-to-date PlayStation 1. And you can buy classic PlayStation 1 games through them. And again, Sony will obviously get a cut of that. Now, on the issue of rights and ownership, again, that has to be settled. That again is where this will all begin with litigation. There has to be something made into law about preserving video games. And that is going to be the hardest battle.
Yeah.
Once that is done, then a lot of these issues will go away, or will have solutions to them. Because again, it is not going to get better. And until we can get this issue taken care of, the game industry is always just on this constant cycle of being on life support.
Indeed.
And
everyone call up your game lawyer friends for sure.
And I can't think of a happier way of ending.
It's really, really bad, guys. See you next time.
There you go. Yeah, so I'm looking at the Polymega. Yeah, so it is about... Let's see, game database. It says you can digitize your game onto it.
Yep.
It doesn't look like it's available now, however. Let's see, Polymega, ultra pre-order. Yep, again, if we can just get, something that we can then, get this as the, the standard going forward, it would do so much to help this out. And again, the goal of all of this is about preserving games, and we have to legitimize it. And until those things happen, it's just not going to get better. There is no reason why it should be a pain to play a game from the PlayStation 3 ever. It shouldn't be a pain to play PlayStation 4 games right now.
No, it shouldn't.
And again, my final point in all this is that if you're hoping that the console or the rights holders are going to solve this problem, they are not. And it is going to take a third party, and again, a neutral third party, in order for us to get a proper solution.
Yeah.
But that is everything that I have to say while my voice is dying. So, anything from you?
Yeah, well, just my final points. Like you were just pretty much gonna say the same things. Is just like, we're gonna need some type of legislation. We need some laws, and like if you're interested in it and you're interested in this, talk like to your local official. Talk around get on the ground and see and get involved and see what we can do, because it's going to take of us and to get this moving as a collective, right? So if the first things first is we have to have some where it says, okay, after so much time of non-market, right, 10, 15 years, then it reaches open source, because we also have to tackle not only just the car, we also have to tackle like the online game. Another issue, like, does the company have to open server architecture after they shut down? If they shut down, that's it. That means if you create and you shut down, you must release the server code so that way people can emulate it, because it is only fair that your consumer, etc. Blah blah blah, and that would be in laws. So laws first. Then after that, we're gonna have, then it's gonna have to be us, right? Like on the ground to make it legitimate. And other than that, it's super important. Do whatever you can. Do some research if you're interested in it, because this is really important for the history and for the future of our games. I mean, that's pretty much it. All of us are going to have to do something if we want this to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you were cutting in and out there a little bit as you were talking.
Oh, man. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah. Yep, and it's not, like we said, like, the first step is going to have to be making some very hard calls as to what is the shelf life of a game. And again, like, I think 10 years is, I think it's a good start. I would imagine it would probably get pushed back to like 15 years.
15 years, probably, yeah.
But there has to be a start. And I think, again, this is where a lot of studios are worried about. Because just like with the whole ESRB, with the loot box laws and stuff like that, once it gets set in law, that's it. Like, the game industry loses that piece of control forever. And it has a lot of people worried. But again, it's that case of, do you view video games as a disposable product? Or do you feel that it is a piece of art that should be maintained? And again, when we say maintain, we mean that you should be able to play it. Even if that means, again, like saying in 30 years from now, someone can, if they want to play Dark Souls 1 for free, let them. Because I'm sure we'll be up to, we'll finally get Bloodborne 2 in 20 years.
Finally get Bloodborne 2.
Maybe Half-Life 3.
Or like the trailer. We'll get the trailer.
So, with that, I think we'll wrap things up. So remember, as I said, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is trash. Nobody cares about Bloodborne. Halo is just awful and should be thrown out in the trash with all the Call of Duties. You can enjoy all those clips of that. I'll be happy to see them on Twitter, or it's being rebranded possibly as we're speaking, so who knows what will be on. But we are going to wrap things up for this week's show. We still need to think of what the topic will be for next time. And if you have any suggestions, let us know down below.
Yep, exactly. And all my links are down below. Don't forget about the Game Jam. Join the Discord. We have channels open, so we talk about join, get a team, etc. Help. Josh?
Other than that, again, do all the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. Check out the Game Wisdom Game Jam. Again, we have signups going. It will be starting in August 14th. Do all that YouTubing stuff. Buy all my books. Other than that, anything else from you?
Yeah, wishlist my games. Wishlist my games. Buy Josh's book. And that's about it. Hopefully I'm not cutting out still. Am I cutting out?
You're good right now. It's very weird. I
Okay.
wonder if it's something on my end with OBS.
Strange. Anyway.
Yeah. But anyway, we'll be back next Saturday around 5 p.m. ET for our regular time. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Have a great rest of your weekend, and see everyone next time and next show.